I'm Daniel, a 38-year-old architect in Portland, married to Clara for 12 years. Our life seemed perfect. Clara, a vibrant graphic designer, filled our home with laughter and color. We had a rhythm, morning coffee rituals, weekend hikes, and late-night talks about dreams. But 6 months ago, something shifted. Clara started staying late at her studio, claiming client deadlines. Her phone buzzed constantly, and she'd smile at it, then tuck it away. I trusted her, so I dismissed the unease creeping into my gut. One evening, I found her sketchbook open on the kitchen table. Amid her usual vibrant designs was a drawing of a man's face. Sharp jaw, intense eyes, unfamiliar. The detail was obsessive, almost intimate. I asked her about it, and she laughed, saying it was a client's portrait for a project. Her eyes flickered, though, and I felt a pang of doubt. I didn't press, but I started noticing other things. A new perfume, a scarf I didn't recognize, and her sudden interest in poetry readings downtown. Clara had always hated poetry. I decided to surprise her at her studio one night, bringing her favorite Thai takeout. The lights were off, and her car was gone. I called her, and she said she was working late. My heart sank. I drove home, the food cold in the passenger seat, and sat in the dark, wondering if I was paranoid or if Clara was slipping away. That night, I couldn't sleep, haunted by the stranger's face in her sketchbook. The next morning, I checked her laptop while she showered. Her browser history showed searches for a man named Julian Voss, a local poet. My stomach churned. I Googled him, tall, charismatic, with a cult following at poetry slams. His Instagram was full of cryptic verses and photos of dimly lit venues. One photo showed a woman in a scarf like Clara's, her face obscured. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. I wasn't ready to confront her, but I needed answers. I started paying attention to her schedule, noting when she left and returned. I felt like a detective in my own marriage, torn between love and suspicion. Clara's warmth toward me hadn't faded. She still kissed me goodbye, still laughed at my bad puns, but there was a distance, a secret she carried in her eyes. I wanted to believe it was nothing, that I was misreading the signs. But the sketch, the lies, and Julian's name kept circling in my mind. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Clara's late nights became routine, and I played the part of the oblivious husband, smiling through her excuses. I hated myself for it, but I was terrified of shattering our life. I started tracking her movements, not with apps or devices that felt too invasive, but by piecing together her stories. She'd mention a client meeting at a cafe, but I'd drive by and see her car parked near a poetry venue instead. Each lie was a splinter in my heart. One Saturday, Clara said she was attending a design workshop. I offered to join her, but she waved me off, saying it was industry only. After she left, I followed her, keeping my distance. She parked outside a small theater downtown, where a neon sign read, "Poetry Unraveled." My pulse raced as I watched her slip inside, her scarf trailing behind her. I waited, then bought a ticket and entered, blending into the crowd. The room was dim, filled with bohemian types sipping wine. Julian Voss stood on stage, his voice hypnotic, reciting verses about forbidden love. Clara sat in the front row, her eyes locked on him, her face glowing with something I hadn't seen in years. I left before the event ended, my chest tight. At home, I poured whiskey and stared at our wedding photo. Clara's smile in that frame felt like a lie. When she returned, she was radiant, humming a tune. She kissed me, but her lips tasted of wine, not workshop coffee. I asked about her day, and she spun a story about color theory lectures. I nodded, my anger simmering. I needed proof, not just suspicions. The next day, I visited her studio while she was out. Her desk was a mess of sketches, and I found a hidden notebook. Inside were poems, not in her handwriting, signed JV. They spoke of stolen moments and a woman with eyes like dawn. Tucked between the pages was a photo of Clara and Julian, arms around each other, laughing at a park. My knees buckled. This wasn't a fling. It was a betrayal woven into her soul. I took the photo, my hands trembling, and left, That night, I lay beside Clara, her breathing soft as she slept. I wanted to shake her awake, demand answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed a plan, something to make her feel the weight of her deception. Revenge wasn't my nature, but the pain was too raw. I started researching Julian, learning his habits, his haunts. He was the key to unraveling this, and I'd use him to expose Clara's lies. I didn't know how far I'd go, but the seed of vengeance had taken root, and it was growing. I immersed myself in Julian Voss's world, driven by a mix of obsession and betrayal. His poetry events were listed online, and I attended one incognito wearing a hoodie and glasses. The venue was a cramped bar with exposed brick walls, packed with devotees hanging on Julian's every word. He was magnetic, his voice weaving tales of passion and loss. I saw why Clara was drawn to him. His charisma was a stark contrast to my steady, predictable life. But I wasn't here to admire him. I was here to understand. Clara wasn't at this event, which gave me space to observe. Julian mingled after his reading, charming women and men alike. I overheard him mention a muse who inspired his recent work. My blood ran cold. I lingered, sipping a beer, and struck up a conversation with a regular, posing as a poetry fan. She gushed about Julian's mystery woman, someone who'd been at his readings for months, always in a scarf. I forced a smile, my mind racing. I started following Julian's social media, cross-referencing his posts with Clara's absences. The pattern was clear. Her late nights aligned with his events. I found a private Facebook group for his fans, and after creating a fake profile, I joined. The group was a goldmine. Photos of Julian at after-parties, Clara in the background of several, her scarf unmistakable. One post mentioned a private reading at Julian's loft next week. I knew Clara would be there. I needed concrete evidence, something undeniable. I considered hiring a private investigator but decided to handle it myself. I bought a small camera, the kind used for vlogging, and tested it in low light. My plan was to crash the private reading, record what I could, and confront Clara with the truth. The thought of seeing them together made me sick, but I had to know the extent of her betrayal. At home, Clara was her usual self, cooking dinner, teasing me about my messy desk. Her normalcy was infuriating. How could she live this double life so effortlessly? I played along, but my smiles were hollow. I started sleeping poorly, haunted by visions of her with Julian, their laughter mocking me. I hid the camera and the photo from her notebook in my office, locked away. Each night, I studied the photo, memorizing their faces, fueling my resolve. The night before the private reading, Clara said she had a team-building event at work. I nodded, my heart pounding. Tomorrow, I'd follow her to Julian's loft. I didn't know what I'd do with the footage, but I knew it would change everything. The man I'd been trusting, forgiving, was fading. In his place was someone colder, ready to reclaim his dignity, no matter the cost. The night of Julian's private reading arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves and determination. Clara left the house in a rush, her scarf draped over her shoulders, claiming her team-building event would run late. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my camera and drove to the address I'd found in the Facebook group, a converted warehouse in an artsy part of town. My hands shook as I parked a block away, blending into the evening crowd. The loft's entrance was unmarked, but I spotted Clara's car nearby. I slipped inside, following a group of bohemian types up a creaky staircase. The loft was spacious, with string lights and mismatched furniture. About 20 people mingled, holding wine glasses, while Julian's voice drifted from a corner, reciting a poem. Clara stood near him, her eyes fixed on him, a smile playing on her lips. My stomach twisted, but I stayed hidden behind a bookshelf, the camera rolling. Julian's poem was about a woman who burned through his veins, and the crowd murmured appreciation. Clara's face glowed, and I knew she was the muse. I recorded them for 10 minutes, capturing her adoring gaze, his lingering glances. Then, Julian announced a break, and Clara followed him to a secluded corner. I crept closer, my camera steady. They whispered, their heads close, and then he brushed her cheek. She leaned into his touch, and my world shattered. I wanted to storm over, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had what I needed. I slipped out, my heart pounding, and drove home. In my office, I played the footage. The video was clear, Clara's betrayal laid bare. I saved it to a USB drive, my mind racing with possibilities. Confrontation wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the weight of her lies, to lose something as precious as my trust. I spent the next day planning. Clara was out, allegedly at a client meeting. I researched Julian's life deeper, finding his booking agent's contact. Posing as a venue manager, I learned Julian was pitching a poetry book to a major publisher. His career hinged on reputation. An idea formed, a cruel, precise revenge. I'd expose their affair publicly, at Julian's next big reading, in a way that would humiliate them both. I designed a flyer, using a still from the video. Clara and Julian, mid-embrace, with the caption, "The muse behind the words." I printed hundreds, planning to distribute them at the event. I also drafted an anonymous email to Julian's publisher, attaching the video, hinting at his unprofessional conduct. It was ruthless, but so was Clara's deception. As I sealed the USB drive in an envelope, I felt a strange calm. The man I'd been was gone. Tomorrow I'd set the stage for their downfall. Clara came home that evening, oblivious to the storm brewing. She chatted about her day, her voice light, and I played along, my responses mechanical. Inside, I was a furnace of rage and resolve. The USB drive and flyers were hidden in my office, ready for Julian's next public reading, scheduled in 2 days at a downtown theater. I'd mapped it out. I'd arrive early, scatter the flyers in the lobby, and send the email to the publisher during the event. Clara would be there, I was sure, and she'd see her world unravel. I spent the next day refining my plan. I created a burner email account for the publisher's message, ensuring it couldn't be traced to me. The email was scathing, accusing Julian of exploiting personal relationships for creative gain, with the video as proof. I also wrote a script for myself, practicing what I'd say if Clara confronted me. I wanted to be calm, unyielding, letting her know I'd seen everything. The thought of her shock fueled me. At home, Clara was distracted, checking her phone constantly. I wondered if Julian sensed trouble, but I doubted it. They were too wrapped in their bubble. I tested the waters, asking about her scarf, saying I'd seen one like it at a poetry event. Her face paled, but she recovered, saying it was a common style. Her lie was smooth, but I saw the crack in her facade. It strengthened my resolve. The night before the reading, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my office, staring at the flyers. The image of Clara and Julian burned into me, but I also felt a pang of guilt. Was I going too far? I pushed it aside. She'd chosen this path, not me. I thought about our early years, the promises we'd made. Those memories were tainted now, and I needed to reclaim my dignity. This wasn't just revenge. It was survival. I packed a bag with the flyers, the USB drive, and a change of clothes, unsure where I'd go after the event. I didn't want to face Clara immediately. I needed space to process what came next. Divorce was likely, but I couldn't think that far. My focus was the reading, the moment their lies would be exposed. I imagined Clara's face, Julian's career crumbling, and felt a grim satisfaction. As dawn broke, I hid the bag in my car and went through the motions of breakfast with Clara. She kissed me goodbye, saying she had a busy day. I smiled, knowing she'd be at the reading. I drove to work, but my mind was elsewhere, counting down the hours. Tonight, I'd step into the theater not as Daniel, the betrayed husband, but as the architect of their ruin. The stage was set and I was ready. The theater buzzed with anticipation as I arrived, my bag slung over my shoulder. The neon marquee announced Julian Voss, Words Unbound, and the crowd was a mix of hipsters and intellectuals. I wore a cap and glasses, blending into the shadows. Clara's car was in the lot, confirming she was here. My heart pounded, but my resolve was iron. I slipped into the lobby, where ushers handed out programs. While they were distracted, I scattered my flyers on tables, under chairs, and in bathroom stalls. Each one bore the image of Clara and Julian, their embrace frozen, with the caption, "The muse behind the words." I found a seat in the back, my camera ready to capture the fallout. The lights dimmed, and Julian took the stage, his voice weaving a spell over the audience. Clara sat near the front, her scarf a beacon of betrayal. I watched her, not him, noting every smile she gave him. My phone was in my hand, the burner email drafted to Julian's publisher, the video attached. I'd send it midway through the reading, timing it for maximum impact. As Julian recited a poem about a hidden flame, I noticed people picking up the flyers. Whispers spread, heads turning toward Clara. Her face remained serene, oblivious to the storm. I sent the email, my finger steady on the screen. The publisher would see the video within minutes, and Julian's book deal would crumble. I felt a surge of power, the architect of their ruin. Halfway through the reading, an usher approached Clara, holding a flyer. She glanced at it, and her posture stiffened. She scanned the room, her eyes darting, but I was a ghost in the crowd. Julian faltered mid-verse, noticing the disturbance. The audience murmured, more flyers circulating. I recorded it all, their unraveling unfolding like a play. Clara stood, clutching her scarf, and slipped out a side door. Julian continued, but his voice cracked. I followed Clara, keeping my distance. She stood in the alley, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice frantic. "Julian, what's happening? Those flyers. Someone knows." I stayed hidden, my camera capturing her panic. This was only the beginning. I returned to the theater, where Julian was wrapping up early, his charm frayed. The crowd was distracted, discussing the flyers. I left before the lights came up, my bag lighter, my heart heavier. The first blow had landed, but I wasn't done. Clara would face me soon, and I'd make sure she felt the weight of her lies. I drove home, the camera footage burning a hole in my pocket. Clara wasn't there yet, giving me time to prepare. I uploaded the video to my laptop, backing it up on a cloud drive. The flyers had done their work, and the email to the publisher was a ticking bomb. I poured a whiskey, my hands steady now, and waited. The house felt like a stage, and I was ready for the final act with Clara. She arrived an hour later, her face pale, her scarf gone. She dropped her bag and stared at me, her eyes wide. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I nodded, gesturing to the couch. She sat, wringing her hands, and started spinning a story about a misunderstanding at the reading. I let her talk, her words a fragile web of lies. When she paused, I opened my laptop and played the loft video. Her and Julian, their whispered intimacy. Clara froze, her breath catching. "How?" she whispered. I didn't answer, letting the silence crush her. "It wasn't what you think," she stammered. "Julian's just a friend, an inspiration." I laughed, cold and sharp, and showed her the flyer. "Then why are you his muse, Clara? Why lie about everything?" Her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands, sobbing. I felt no pity, only a grim satisfaction. I told her I'd sent the video to Julian's publisher, that his career was likely over. She gasped, begging me to retract it, saying it would destroy him. "What about us?" I asked, my voice low. "What about me?" She had no answer, only tears. I stood, towering over her. "You chose this, Clara. You built this lie." I walked to my office, locking the door, leaving her on the couch. Her cries echoed, but I was numb. I checked my burner email. Julian's publisher had replied, requesting a meeting to discuss concerns. My plan was working. I imagined Julian's panic, his dreams unraveling. But Clara's betrayal cut deeper, and I needed her to hurt as I did. I drafted a new plan. I'd share the video with her design clients, framing it as her inspiration. Her career, like Julian's, would suffer. It was cruel, but so was her double life. I slept in my office, the whiskey bottle empty, dreaming of justice. The next morning, Clara was gone. A note on the kitchen table read, "I need time. I'm sorry." I crumpled it, my anger flaring. She thought she could run from this? I checked her social media. She'd gone offline, likely hiding with Julian or a friend. I didn't care where. I'd find her. My revenge was a machine now, unstoppable. I sent the video to 3 of her biggest clients, using another burner email with a message. Is this the professionalism you expect from Clara? By noon, I got replies. 2 clients were reviewing their contracts. The third called her conduct unacceptable. I smiled, imagining her panic when they confronted her. I also posted the flyer image in the poetry group's Facebook, anonymously, with a caption, Julian's muse revealed. The group exploded, comments piling up, some defending Julian, others slamming him. Clara's name surfaced, and her reputation began to fray. I drove to Julian's loft, curious about his reaction. His car was there, but the windows were dark. I left a flyer under his wiper, a small jab. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. A text from Clara's friend. Mara, what's going on? Clara's a mess. I ignored it. Mara didn't know the half of it. I stopped at a cafe, checking the poetry group. The post had 200 comments, and someone had tagged Clara's design page. Her professional life was crumbling, just as I'd planned. At home, I found Clara's sketchbook, the one with Julian's face. I tore it apart, scattering the pages. Felt petty, but it was cathartic. I emailed more sporadically, sharing the video with local art blogs, hinting at a scandal in the design community. The blogs bit posting clickbait headlines. Clara's name was everywhere now, linked to Julian's. I wondered where she was, if she was with him plotting damage control. It didn't matter, they couldn't outrun this. That night, I got an email from Julian himself, forwarded through the burner account. He begged me to stop, saying he'd lost his book deal and his reputation. Clara's suffering too, he wrote. Isn't that enough? I laughed, deleting it. It wasn't enough. They'd humiliated me, and I'd make sure their worlds burned. I planned my next move. A public confrontation, maybe at Clara's studio, where her colleagues would see the truth. The thought kept me awake, my mind a furnace of vengeance. I learned Clara was back at her studio, likely trying to salvage her client relationships. I decided to confront her there, in front of her team. It was risky, but I wanted her to face her lies publicly. I packed the laptop with the video, printed more flyers, and drove over. The studio was a sleek space with glass walls, her colleagues busy at their desks. Clara was in her office, head down, typing furiously. She didn't see me enter. I knocked, and her eyes widened. Daniel, what are you doing here? She hissed, glancing at her team. I smiled, loud enough for others to hear. I thought your colleagues should know about your inspiration. I opened the laptop, the video ready, and turned the screen toward the open door. Her team looked up, curious. Clara lunged to close the door, but I blocked it, hitting play. Her voice, Julian's whispers, filled the room. Gasps rippled through the studio. Clara's face was ashen. Stop it, Daniel, please, she begged. I paused the video, tossing flyers onto her desk. You stopped being my wife when you chose him, I said, my voice steady. Her colleagues stared, some whispering, others grabbing flyers. One, her boss, approached, his face grim. Clara, we need to talk. Now. I left, the studio buzzing behind me. I'd lit the fuse, and her career was imploding. I drove to a bar, adrenaline pumping. My phone buzzed. Mara again. Furious. You're destroying her. Daniel. This isn't you. I texted back. She destroyed us. I ordered a drink, replaying the studio scene. Clara's humiliation was palpable, but it didn't erase my pain. I checked the art blogs. 2 had posted about the affair, naming Clara and Julian. The poetry group was a war zone, with Julian's fans turning on him. My revenge was a wildfire, spreading beyond my control. I wondered if I'd gone too far. Clara's note, her tears, flickered in my mind. But then I remembered the loft, her lies, the photo in her notebook. She'd chosen this. I planned my next step. I'd send the video to her family, her parents who adored her. It was vicious, but I wanted her isolated as I'd felt. I drafted the email, my finger hovering over send. The bar's noise faded, and I saw my reflection in the glass. Cold, unrecognizable. I didn't send it. Not yet. I went home, the house empty without Clara. Her absence was a wound, but my anger kept me upright. I checked the cloud drive, over a dozen downloads of the video from the links I'd sent. Her clients, her colleagues, the blogs, everyone had seen it. I imagined her scrambling, explaining, but no excuse could undo the truth. Julian's social media was silent. He'd gone dark. Their worlds were collapsing just as I'd engineered. Mara called, and I answered, ready for her anger. "Daniel, Clara's with me," she said, her voice shaking. "She's broken. She knows she messed up, but it's too much." I stayed silent, letting her plead. "She loves you, Daniel. She's ending things with Julian." I laughed, bitter. "She loved me while lying for months." "I'm done, Mara." I hung up, my chest tight. Love didn't justify betrayal. I walked through the house, seeing Clara everywhere. Her art on the walls, her coffee mug on the counter. I packed her things, not gently, stuffing them into boxes. I'd leave them at Mara's, severing her from this space. As I worked, I found a letter in her nightstand, addressed to me, dated a week ago. It was unopened, her handwriting shaky. "Daniel, I'm lost. I need to tell you something." I tore it up, unread. Her words were too late. I drove to Mara's, dropping the boxes without knocking. Back home, I checked the poetry group. Julian had posted an apology, admitting a personal mistake and canceling his tour. Comments tore him apart. Clara's design page was flooded with criticism, her clients pulling projects. My revenge was complete, but it felt hollow. I'd wanted them to suffer, but my pain remained, a shadow I couldn't shake. I sat in the dark, the laptop open. The video looped, Clara's smile for Julian mocking me. I deleted it, then the backups, the flyers, the burner emails. Not out of regret, but because I was done carrying their betrayal. Tomorrow I'd see a lawyer, start the divorce. The cruelest revenge, I realized, was letting Clara live with her choices, while I rebuilt without her. I poured another whiskey, the house silent, and planned my new beginning. The morning after deleting the video, I woke to a strange calm. The house was a tomb of memories, but I felt unburdened. Clara's betrayal had fueled my rage, but now it was a dull ache. I called a lawyer, scheduling a meeting to start the divorce. I wanted it clean, no contact, just a severance of our shared life. As I sipped coffee, my phone buzzed. An email from one of Clara's clients, copied to me by mistake. They'd terminated her contract, citing reputational damage. My revenge had ripples I hadn't anticipated. I drove to the lawyer's office, passing Clara's studio. It was dark, a closed sign on the door. Her career, once vibrant, was in ruins, and I felt a flicker of guilt. Had I gone too far? I pushed it aside, focusing on the meeting. The lawyer was brisk, outlining a no-fault divorce. I agreed, but insisted Clara get nothing, no alimony, no shared assets. She'd built her ruin. She could live in it. I left with paperwork and a sense of finality. At home, I checked the poetry group one last time. Julian had deleted his account, and the group was now debating his fall from grace. Clara's name was a footnote, her design page abandoned. I closed my laptop, done with their world. But Mara texted, insistent, "Daniel, meet Clara. She needs closure." I refused, but Mara's words gnawed at me. Closure wasn't for Clara, it was for me. I agreed to meet at a neutral cafe tomorrow. That night, I sorted through Clara's boxes, finding a photo of us hiking, her smile genuine. I burned it in the backyard, the flames cleansing. My revenge had been cruel but necessary. Clara had woven a non-standard betrayal, not physical but emotional. Her heart given to Julian through poetry and secrets. I'd exposed it, shattering their facades, but the cost was my own peace. I slept fitfully, dreaming of her scarf, fluttering in a void. The cafe meeting loomed, and I prepared like a general. I'd listen, but offer no forgiveness. Clara had to face her choices as I faced mine. I wrote a list of what I'd lost, Trust, love, 12 years, and what I'd gained. Clarity, strength. My revenge wasn't just about pain. It was about reclaiming myself. As dawn broke, I felt ready, not for reconciliation, but for the final act of letting go. The cafe was quiet, its wooden tables bathed in morning light. I arrived early, choosing a corner seat, my back to the wall. Clara entered, her scarf gone, her face gaunt. She looked like a stranger, not the woman I'd loved. She sat, her hands trembling, and started with an apology. Daniel, I was wrong. Julian was a mistake. Her voice cracked, but I stayed stone-faced, letting her unravel. She admitted the affair wasn't physical but emotional, a bond forged in poetry and shared dreams. I felt alive with him, she said, tears falling. But I never stopped loving you. I laughed, sharp and cold. Love doesn't lie, Clara. Love doesn't hide. I showed her a flyer, one I'd kept, and she flinched. You chose him and I chose truth. She begged for forgiveness, but I shook my head. You're free now. Live with it. I told her about the divorce, the terms non-negotiable. Her eyes widened, but she nodded, defeated. I lost everything, she whispered. Her clients, her studio, her reputation. I felt no triumph, only emptiness. My revenge had worked, but it hadn't healed me. I stood, leaving her at the table, her sobs fading as I walked out. The air was crisp, and I breathed deeply, feeling lighter. Driving home, I reflected on her words. The betrayal was non-standard, a theft of her heart, not her body, but it cut just as deep. Julian's poetry had been her escape, and I'd turned it into her cage. I stopped at a park, watching families laugh, and wondered if I'd ever feel that joy again. My cruelty had been precise, but it left scars on me too. I vowed to move forward, to rebuild without vengeance. That evening, I emailed Mara, thanking her for pushing the meeting. It wasn't closure, but it was an end. I deleted Clara's contact, her photos, her presence from my life. The house felt mine again, a space to start anew. I poured a whiskey, toasting to survival, and planned my next steps. A new project, a new city, a new me. Weeks passed, and the divorce papers were signed. Clara didn't contest, her fight gone. She'd moved to Seattle, Mara told me, starting over with freelance work. Julian had left Portland, his career in tatters. I felt no satisfaction, only relief. My revenge had been a wildfire, consuming them, but I was done tending its flames. I focused on myself, accepting a project in Chicago, a museum design, a fresh challenge. I sold the house, its memories too heavy. Packing was cathartic, each item a choice. Keep, donate, discard. Clara's art went to charity, her presence erased. I found her torn letter in my desk, still unread. I burned it, unopened, its words irrelevant. My new apartment in Chicago was a blank slate, high above the city, with views of Lake Michigan. I felt like I was breathing for the first time in months. At work, I threw myself into the museum, sketching late into the night. Colleagues noticed my drive, and I earned a promotion. Socially, I was cautious, avoiding romance but building friendships. A coworker, Elena, invited me to an art gallery opening, and I went, surprised by my laughter. The art was vibrant, untainted by Clara's style, and I felt a spark of joy. Life was possible again. I reflected on my revenge. Exposing Clara and Julian publicly, ruining their careers, was cruel but fitting. Their betrayal, her emotional affair, woven through poetry, wasn't a fling but a deliberate choice. I'd matched their deception with precision, using their own tools against them. But I'd learned cruelty wasn't my nature. It was a response to pain. I vowed never to let betrayal twist me again. Nights in Chicago were quiet, and I'd sit by the window, sketching or reading. I started a journal, not of anger, but of hope. Each entry was a step away from Clara, toward a man I respected. The scars remained, but they were fading, like ink on old paper. I was ready to live, not just survive. Months later, I got an email from an unknown address. It was Clara, forwarded through a mutual friend. She'd written a blog post, anonymous but clearly hers, about losing herself in a poet's world and the fallout. She didn't name me, but mentioned a righteous storm that woke her. She was rebuilding, teaching art to kids, finding peace. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "To the man I hurt." I read it twice, then deleted it. Her redemption wasn't my concern. The post stirred memories, and I Googled Julian. He was in New York, self-publishing chapbooks, his following small but loyal. A review called him humbled, authentic. I snorted. His authenticity came at my expense. But I let it go. Their lives were theirs, and mine was here in Chicago, thriving. I'd won, not by their ruin, but by my renewal. Elena became a friend, her wit a balm. She sensed my past but didn't pry, and I appreciated it. One night, over wine, I shared a vague version of Clara's betrayal. Not the revenge, just the loss. Elena listened, then said, "You're stronger for it." I nodded, believing her. I wasn't ready for love, but I was open to possibility, a shift I hadn't expected. I visited Portland for a conference, walking past Clara's old studio. It was a yoga space now, her mark erased. I felt no nostalgia, only distance. The city was my past, Chicago my future. I met Mara for coffee, and she updated me. Clara was healing, but alone. "You broke her, Daniel," Mara said, not accusingly. I shrugged. "She broke me first. We parted as friends, but I knew I'd never return." My journal grew, pages of sketches and dreams. I wrote about the betrayal, not with anger but curiosity, how love could twist into deceit. Clara's affair, non-standard as it was, taught me vigilance, but also resilience. I was grateful in a strange way for the lesson. A year after the theater, I stood on the museum's completed steps, its glass facade gleaming. The opening was a success, my name in the program. Elena was there, her smile warm, and I felt a flutter. Hope, not pain. Chicago had rebuilt me, brick by brick, as I'd rebuilt this space. Clara and Julian were ghosts, their betrayal a faded blueprint. I reflected on my revenge. Scattering flyers, sending videos, dismantling their careers. It was cruel, a mirror to Clara's emotional affair. Her bond with Julian, woven through poetry and lies, wasn't a fleeting passion but a deliberate theft of her heart. My response was proportionate, exposing their truth to the world. But the real victory was here, in my new life, free of their shadows. I started dating Elena slowly, her patience a gift. She knew my scars, and I trusted her with them. My journal became a book, a fictionalized account of betrayal and rebirth, published under a pseudonym. Readers called it raw, redemptive, and I smiled, knowing its truth. The royalties went to a charity for broken families, a quiet amends for my cruelty. One night, I dreamed of Clara's scarf, not choking me, but floating away. I woke, the lake sparkling outside, and felt whole. The betrayal had shaped me, but it didn't define me. I was Daniel, architect of buildings and my own peace, no longer the husband of a muse. I sketched a new design, a home for myself, and knew I'd build it with joy. As I walked the city, I passed a poetry slam poster, no Julian in sight. I laughed, free. My revenge was complete, not in their pain but in my triumph. Clara and Julian had their paths. I had mine. The stars above Chicago winked, and I moved forward, my heart open, my story mine alone.